Hello everyone and welcome to the Bloodborne Iceberg. I haven't seen a video really detailing everything that's on this iceberg, so I'm going to make it my personal mission to explain everything to the best of my ability. There are probably going to be some things that I don't know a whole lot about, but I'll try as much as I can to clarify whatever's on this iceberg. So without further ado, let's get right into it. 3/3 chords. 3/3 chords is referring to the note you find in the second floor of the lecture building in the Mensis Nightmare. The note itself is referring to the third ending you can get in Bloodborne, where if you consume 3/3 chords instead of the game ending after beating Gurman, another boss will appear, the Moon Presence. Make contact. Make contact is a gesture that can be obtained in the orphanage later in the game. The purpose of this gesture is not entirely clear, but if used in front of the Mensis brain, you will obtain the highest level of Moon Rune after waiting 30 seconds. Perhaps this is a way to maintain contact with the Great Ones? Who knows? Fun fact, the statue that you get this gesture from disappears if you leave and come back to the area. Vidya. This one is pretty simple. Vidya is a popular YouTuber that speculates on lore in From Software games. Check him out if you want to hear some interesting lore theories, uncut content, and other tidbits of information for From Software games. Beast Claw. The Beast Claw is quite an obscure weapon in Bloodborne. What makes it obscure is that it can only be found in Chalice dungeons. Not much else to say other than the Beast Claw seems like a pretty decent weapon. Music Box versus Gascoigne. The tiny music box is an item obtained from the girl on the window near central Yarnham. It can be used on Father Gascoigne to freeze him momentarily in his boss fight. The description of the box reads, "A small music box received from a young Yarnham girl. Plays a song shared by her mother and father. Inside the lid is a small scrap of paper, perhaps an old message. Two names can be made out, however faintly, Viola and Gascoigne. Fun fact, the music from the box plays a tune for the Murgo's Wet Nurse boss fight." Cleric Beast Shortcut. The Cleric Beast Shortcut was a cut shortcut featuring in the Bloodborne Alpha that would connect the Great Bridge to the Cathedral Ward. It is unknown why the shortcut was ultimately cut out from the final game. Looking at it, I do kinda see that the shortcut is majorly pointless, seeing as you never really come back to the Great Bridge again, unless you're farming for vials. The guy in Ludwig's boss arena surviving. Apparently if you're real careful, the bloody guy on the corpse pile can survive the boss fight if by some miracle either you or Ludwig don't hit him. But it's almost impossible since Ludwig tends to destroy everything around him. If he does survive, he'll just laugh. Not much to this one, honestly. The nightmares are stacked on top of each other. From the Nightmare Frontier, one can see shipwrecks below. Some people have theorized that these are the same ships from the fishing hamlet area in the Old Hunters DLC. This wouldn't be surprising since transcendence and going beyond the nightmare seems to be big themes in Bloodborne, so I wouldn't be surprised if it were true. Yosefka is an impostor. Yosefka is the first NPC you meet in Bloodborne, funnily enough in Yosefka's clinic. At first she sounds kind and caring, legitimately worried for your well-being, even giving you the help in the form of a blood vial. Then at some point, Yosefka's voice changes and her tone takes on more of an evil one. At some stage, the real Yosefka is turned into a kin creature and replaced with an evil doppelganger. She will ask you to send any possible survivors to her clinic, which sounds appealing at first, but as you venture into the clinic from the back entrance, this turns out to be a terrible mistake, as all the people you sent have been turned into alien abominations. To further confirm this, at the end of the credits there are two voices listed for Yosefka. Brain of Mensis Rune. I already touched on this one in the make contact section, but again, if you do the make contact gesture in front of the Brain of Mensis, after a short while you'll get the leveled up Moon Rune. Lesser Amygdala. Lesser Amygdala are the grotesque creatures that are seen on the buildings in Yarnham and Yarhagul once the Blood Moon has been activated, or if you have 40 insight. These are the lesser types of Amygdala, unlike the one you fight in the Nightmare Frontier. Winter Lantern is made up of messengers. Winter lanterns are possibly the most terrifying creatures in Bloodborne. Their frenzying effect is bad enough, but their grotesque appearance alongside the chilling tune they hung to themselves make them a horrifying enemy. Apparently if one looks closely, you can see that they're made up entirely of messengers. I personally don't see it. I see more of a resemblance to the doll than the messengers. Hunter's Rune in Fishing Hamlet. Close to the Fishing Hamlet lantern there's a headless body hung upside down. If you look closely, it resembles the Hunter Rune. I'm sure this was done on purpose, but I can't say I noticed it until recently. Queen Yarnham. Queen Yarnham is the secret boss found deep within the Chalice dungeons. As you could guess, the city of Yarnham is named after her. She makes other appearances in the game, like after the Rom boss fight and just before the Murgo's Wet Nurse boss fight. She was the queen of the ancient Fumerian civilization. When killed, she drops the Yharnam stone, which at the time of making this video still does nothing. It looks like some weird fetus. If we're going to delve into lore, I'll be here all day, so if you want to find out more, check out some videos on YouTube. I'm sure you'll find the answers you seek there. 60 Insight. I believe this refers to a change that occurs when you hit 60 Insight. You'll be able to hear a baby crying in the distance, no matter what area you're in except for the Hunter's Dream. I don't know about this one, since I've just recently played through the game, and I recall hearing the baby cry when I had less than 60 Insight. Old load screen. This just refers to the pre-patch load screen for Bloodborne, where it was literally just a logo. Pretty boring, huh? Uncanny weapon variants. These are the weapon variants found in the Chalice dungeons. The difference between these variants and normal weapons are the sockets for gems, that is all. There are also lost weapon variants, which feature different sockets as well. Fishing Hamlet Slug Farm. I'm not entirely sure about this one since there is such little info about it online, but in the bottom of the Fishing Hamlet there seems to be a slug farm in operation. The floor is covered with slugs and snail-like humanoid creatures. It has something to do with Cos, but that something is not entirely clear to me. My personal theory is that slugs are the baby form of great ones, but that's probably wrong. Berserk. Berserk is a manga that heavily influenced a lot of Miyazaki's work in Bloodborne and Dark Souls. I mean, just look at the Hunter's Mark compared to the Brand of Sacrifice, or Ludwig with the Possessed Horse, or Guts' weapon compared to the Greatsword in Dark Souls. The list of references is huge, and I'll leave a link in the description to a great article that outlines a lot of them, if not all. Jura knows the doll. I think this one is pretty straightforward. When you talk to Jura in Old Yarnham, he says that he was a hunter once, but he no longer dreams. This implies that Jura knows of the doll in the Hunter's Dream.
I no longer dream, but I was once a hunter too. There's nothing more horrific than a hunt.
The church caused the scourge of Old Yarnham. In the lore, Old Yarnham was burnt to the ground due to a spreading sickness known as the Ashen Blood. It seemed to be some sort of poison that eventually turned the patients into beasts. Some people have hypothesized that the healing church is to blame for the sickness. Taken from the White Church Garb's description, they believe that medicine is not a means of treatment but rather a method for research, and that some knowledge can only be obtained by exposing oneself to sickness. This to me says that the healing church purposely exposes citizens to the Ashen Blood, hoping to study and research its effects. Nasty stuff. Nightmare crawlers have messengers under them. Crawlers are a monster heavily featured in the nightmare areas. Though mostly harmless, they can inflict a deadly poison with some attacks. One of these attacks exposes the underneath part of the crawlers. What can be seen is what looks like a group of messengers, spitting out the poison at you. I'm not sure what the implication of this is. Dark Souls 1 DLC. This is referring to a character in the Artorias of the Abyss DLC for Dark Souls, named Marvelous Chester. If talked to, he'll mention that he was dragged off to the past, like you. Some have theorized that Chester is from the Bloodborne universe, due to his Victorian-style outfit. It's not entirely impossible that Miyazaki would have been working on Bloodborne whilst working on the DLC, as there is only a 4-year gap between the DLC release and Bloodborne's release. Abandoned Old Workshop. The Abandoned Old Workshop is an area that can be found below the Healing Church Workshop. Requiring a few tricky jumps to get there, it's a hard area to get to. Once you open the doors, you'll be greeted by an almost exact duplicate of the Hunter's Dream area. It's very bizarre. Here you will find an umbilical cord, the old hunter's bone, and a hair clip for the doll. Also the doll clothes, if you feel inclined to wear them for some reason. This abandoned workshop is assumed to be the workshop Gurman used in his days of being a hunter. It fell into disuse as the Healing Church workshop was used more. Bone Ash Hunter Set. The Bone Ash Hunter Set is a set of armor that can be bought from messengers in the Hunter's Dream, once you have beaten the Keeper of the Old Lord's boss in the Chalice Dungeons. It's a pretty nice set, featuring decent physical resistance alongside very good fire resistance. Day 1 Patch Workshop Note. I have no idea what this is referring to, since I've looked this up and I found absolutely nothing about it other than people asking the same question. Will we ever find out what this mythical workshop note is? I don't think so. The Research Hall is Byrgenwerth. This is a theory that the Research Hall in the Old Hunters DLC was actually supposed to be a further addition to the Byrgenwerth location. From unknown sources, it is believed that the Research Hall area has been in the game since release, but inaccessible. It would sort of make sense, and some people have been baffled as to why such an important location is sparsely featured in the game. From the current game standpoint, the Research Hall seems to have no or very little relation to Byrgenwerth. DMC Redgrave. From what I could find from this entry is referring to a Reddit user named DMC Redgrave, who published a 90-page analysis of Bloodborne's lore, characters, and world. I suppose if you have some time to kill, this would definitely help. Shadows over Innsmouth. Shadows over Innsmouth is a story written by H.P. Lovecraft that features eldritch abominations and fish people. Miyazaki has clearly been inspired by this story and Lovecraft's works in general for not only the Bloodborne series but also Dark Souls. There are many parallels between Shadows over Innsmouth and the fishing hamlet in the Old Hunters DLC. Areas unafflicted by Blood Moon. This is referring to areas that are seemingly not affected by the Blood Moon change, such as Cainhurst, the Nightmare Frontier, Nightmare of Mensis, Forbidden Woods, and Old Yarnham. It is unknown why. Project Beast. Project Beast is simply the codename for Bloodborne while it was in development. There's nothing much else to this. Madman's knowledge is a slug. If one looks closely to the stuff coming out of the skull in the picture for Madman's knowledge, you can see that it resembles the form of a slug. The Great Ones are really into the slug motif. Music Box vs Belle. Back to the tiny music box for one more oddity. When you use the music box next to a bell, it will interact with the bell as if it were hit with a weapon. I think when the music box is used, it emits some sort of hitbox that interacts with the bell. It's definitely an unintended glitch that has no further meaning. Skybox Change after Gascoigne. This has to do with the skybox in Yharnam changing ever so slightly after the defeat of Gascoigne. I think this is just to signify that the night is progressing. Yharnam's map geometry doesn't line up. I haven't found much about this one, but it's not entirely unheard of for the world building in From Software games to be inconsistent. I mean, look at the Earthen Peak and Iron Keep elevator. I think any inconsistencies can be chalked up to error. Hail the Nightmare lyrics. Hail the Nightmare is the song that is played in Yahar'gul when you're first taken there by the kidnappers, or as I like to call them, sack boys. Probably don't look that up on Google. Anyway, there are lyrics to the song, all sung in Latin. Translated into English, it says the following. Cursed, you pour out your gift. We're infected, tainted, cursed by the beast. Cursed. Father, I surrender if you grant it. We're infected. Silver in the shadow of water. The mother's blood. Redemption, having been laughed at. Rouses itself, it's lamented by the water. Farewell, farewell. We're infected in the shadow of the water. Cursed. And the silver waters were infected. And the silver of the water. Blood. Blood. Pretty chilling stuff. I don't know about this, but my theory is that the song details the eventual madness that the imbibing of blood brings. Seeing as the song gets more and more intense as it goes, alluding to the madness everyone eventually succumbs to when you consume too much of the crazy blood. Dream Quests of Unknown Kadath. This is yet another work of H.P. Lovecraft. Same as before, this is a story that contains many elements used in Bloodborne, such as travel to nightmares and communing with the Great Ones. Old gameplay trailer. This is referring to surprise surprise old gameplay trailer. From what I can see, this game was panning out to have similar mechanics to Dark Souls, but that obviously changed during development. Byrgenwerth Basement. This refers to a hatch door located in Byrgenwerth that cannot be opened. Many people have theorized that this hatch leads directly to the Chalice dungeons located beneath Yarnham, and that to me seems like a perfectly reasonable explanation. Some say that it leads to the lecture halls, but I find it kinda weird that you'd have to access the lecture hall through a hatch. In the lore, they found the first Fumru Chalice dungeon underneath Byrgenwerth, so the first theory lines up quite nicely. Tomb Prospector Sub. The Tomb Prospector Sub is a Reddit sub that specialises in the exploration of Chalice dungeons. They found many weird things in all sorts of Chalice dungeons, such as the incredibly rare Labyrinth Mole creature, wandering bosses, and the recently discovered Cum Dungeon. No, I didn't misspeak, I said Cum Dungeon, that rewards the player with immense amounts of blood echoes on entry. They do a lot of good work. Lance Mcdonald. I've never heard this name before in the context of Bloodborne, but apparently this guy made the Bloodborne 60fps patch. It's a modification specifically for playing Bloodborne in 60fps exclusively on the PS5 and modded PS4s. It would be nice to be able to play Bloodborne in 60fps, since the game does struggle performance-wise in some areas, but I also suspect that fucking with the FPS would also cause some issues. Perhaps we'll get a PC release someday. Saw Cleaver only weapon with 2 R2 animations. Apparently the Saw Cleaver has 2 different charge attacks. In Cleaver mode there are 2 different charge attacks that can be executed. The second attack can be executed by performing a normal attack, followed by immediately holding down R2 until it charges. Gives you a sort of backhanded charge attack. I've never noticed this myself, so this is pretty neat. Pale Blood. Pale Blood is another facet of Bloodborne's lore that is up for interpretation. As to what it actually is hasn't been clarified. When I think of Pale Blood, I think of the blood that spurts out of kin enemies when you hit them, since it's a very grey, white substance. This signifies that the Pale Blood is an important part of ascending to godhood or becoming a great one, but all we can do at this point is theorise. Jerk Sans. Jerk Sans Frontiers, I hope I said that right, is a YouTuber that discusses the topics in Bloodborne to great detail. I think he is most known for his Bloodborne Up Close series. Yet another YouTuber to check out if you want to know more about the finer details in Bloodborne. Rom's leg sockets. This refers to the holes you see on the sides of Rom. Have you ever wondered why Rom, being the big spider abomination thing she is, only has these dinky little legs? Whereas the tiny versions of her have these massively long legs? I don't know why she doesn't have them, but at one point I think she would have. Were they ripped out? I don't know. Vardividya plagiarism. This is an entry that links 2 people we have already discussed, Vardividya and Redgrave. Vardi released a long video giving a detailed summary of the lore in Bloodborne. Some people noticed that a lot of what he said was very similar to what was contained in Redgrave's 90-page analysis, leading to accusations of plagiarism by Vardi. I don't really know much about this, but I'm sure there is a video or Reddit post greatly detailing the sequence of events. Hemwick is a source of bone marrow ash. Bone marrow ash is a consumable that greatly increases the damage of the next Quicksilver bullet you use. You find a majority, if not all, of this item in Hemwick Charnel Lane. This has led people to believe that this substance is made in Hemwick. The description also reads, according to the workshop, this is a special bone marrow ash collected from Hemwick Charnel Lane. I guess that's case closed. Who wrote Seek Pale Blood? This entry refers to the note found nearby after you wake up in the clinic that reads Seek Pale Blood. This statement is mystifying in itself, but who wrote it? I think it's one of 3 people. It's either the guy in the cutscene, Yosefka, or even yourself. I think it's most likely you who wrote it, as a reminder. Nightmare Frontier is Lauren. I think this theory is based entirely on the fact that the Amygdala, the boss fought in the Nightmare Frontier, drops the ailing Lauren chalice upon defeat. We don't know much about Lauren, but there is a good chance that the alien terrain of the Nightmare Frontier is based on a place called Lauren. Plot is centered around Mensis Ritual. The Mensis Ritual is thought to be the cause of most, if not all, of the horrible happenings in Bloodborne. What is the Mensis Ritual, you ask? Well, it is the ritual that Mikolash initiated to ascend to humanity, to grant them eyes, if you will. He attempted to use Murgo's umbilical cord to communicate with Murgo. The ritual turned out to be an enormous and horrific failure. What they saw was so inconceivable and horrifying that it drove everyone to madness, resulting to what happened in Yargul. You can see the moment frozen in time, people scurrying over walls, trying to escape the ensuing chaos, but to no avail. The Blood Moon is basically the end result of the ritual. I admit that this is a very basic and somewhat terrible explanation, and I'm sure that there are other more informative sources that explain it a lot better than I have. Alpha Skybox. There isn't much about this, but apparently in Alpha, Bloodborne didn't have a skybox in the traditional sense. It had an actual moon that you could run to. There are unfortunately no pictures of this skybox, so there isn't really much else to say. O Flora of the Moon. This is a part of a line of dialogue that the doll can say at very rare occasions. I've heard that this line of dialogue was only heard in the unpatched version of Bloodborne and has since been removed for unknown reasons. The dialogue goes like this.
O Flora of the moon, of the dream. O little ones, O fleeting will of the ancients. Let the hunter be safe. Let her find comfort, and let this dream, her captor, foretell a pleasant awakening.
The doll bleeds pale blood. Back to the doll again. If you attack the doll in the hunter's dream, she'll bleed pale blood. I think there's no doubt in my mind that the doll is of alien origin, so it makes sense that she bleeds like them also. Yharnamite in intro has blood-drunk hunter eye. If you watch the Bloodborne intro cinematic, you can see that the close-up of the Yharnamite's eye is very similar looking to the eye of a blood-drunk hunter. I don't read too much into this, I think this is just them smartly reusing previous assets or something. Labyrinth Mole. As mentioned before, the Labyrinth Mole is a very rare creature that can only be found in certain Chalice dungeons. Chalice Illusory Walls. Featuring mainly in randomized Chalice dungeons, illusory walls can be found. These mainly lead to more Chalice dungeon materials, like tomb mold or ritual blood, and can rarely lead to Chalice dungeon merchants selling lost or uncanny versions of weapons. Ariana is from Cainhurst. This theory stems from the clothing that Ariana wears. She wears the noble dress, which also happens to be found in Cainhurst Castle. Does this mean she has vile blood connections? The only connection I can think of other than the dress is the fact that she calls her own blood whore's blood. A whore can be seen as impure, the same way Alfred mentions the impure bloodline that is the vile bloods. That's all I can think of. Bloodborne Art Book. The Bloodborne Art Book contains interviews and tidbits of information that can't be read anywhere else. It also contains concept art with characters and monsters looking somewhat different to their final version. I actually own this book. Maybe one day I'll make a video on it. Yarnham was built by Pthumerians. This is a theory that Yarnham was originally built by the Pthumerian civilization. It's not too far-fetched, seeing as Queen Yarnham, the namesake of the city, is of Pthumerian origin. I don't know about it being built by Pthumerians. I think it's more likely that Yarnham was built over the Pthumerian civilization, hence the first layer of Chalice Dungeon being a Pthumerian layer. Shadows of Yarnham are bodyguards. The Shadows of Yarnham are the bosses located at the end of the Forbidden Woods. These Ringwraith lookalikes are also found abundantly in Murgo's loft, leading many to believe that they function as Murgo's bodyguards. It definitely makes sense, seeing as they guard the entrance to Byrgenwerth as well, which is what eventually leads the player to Murgo in the first place. Japanese script differences. I'm sure there are a lot of differences between the English and Japanese dialogue in Bloodborne. I think this is a pretty common feature in translations, and I wouldn't read too much into them. The most popular one I can think of is the Bloodletting Beast, which in the Japanese version is called the Host of the Beast Blood, which possibly hints at this boss being the source of the beast blood. Rom is a she. I thought it was pretty common knowledge that Rom is a she, not a he. Confirmed by Miyazaki himself in an interview, Rom is confirmed to be female. I always interpreted her to be the mother of the small spiders in her boss arena. Impurity Rune depicts a bloodletting. I think this one is up to interpretation. The symbol for the impurity rune sort of looks like a bloodletting, which is the act of withdrawing blood from a patient to prevent or cure illness and disease. I'd say this makes sense, given the nature of the story. Cainhurst statues missing limbs. The statues of Cainhurst are a mystery in themselves, with many people questioning why they are even there. I chalked it up to the nobles of Cainhurst being so full of themselves that they had all these statues commissioned of themselves to look at them in awe or something. A lot of people also noticed that the knight statues on the stairway up to Annalise are missing right legs. This corresponds with the item description of the old hunter trousers, which reads, "Beast blood crept up the right leg." This was simply a countermeasure to stop the Knights of Cainhurst from becoming beasts themselves. Lawrence is the bloodletting beast. I don't really see much merit in this entry, seeing as in the Hunter's Nightmare he's clearly seen as a cleric beast on fire. There's much more to this in Reddit posts, but I think a lot of this is baloney, since you fight multiple bloodletting beasts as well. The double barrel shotgun is a cut item from Bloodborne. It is thought to be an early version of the Hunter blunderbuss. There's not much else about it. There's no item icons. There's no information on the damage or anything. It was originally in Project Beast, from what I've read. I do like the idea of blowing every monster apart with a shotgun, so I kind of wish they kept it in. But I guess the blunderbuss is a more time-appropriate weapon. Sekiro tease. This is the belief that Sekiro was teased in the Old Hunters DLC with the character Yamamura. This could be a possibility, but I think this is fake. I think he's just a hunter that happens to hail from eastern lands. With that logic, you could say that the Chikage is also a teaser for Sekiro. Developer chalices. This refers to chalice dungeons that are inaccessible by normal means, but with the right glyphs they can be accessed. Apparently these dungeons can only be accessed on the Game of the Year edition, as entering these glyphs on any other version will crash the game. Things that are normally not in the game can be found, such as warp chairs, unused lighting effects, unused enemy variants, and much more. Amygdala region of the brain. The amygdala happens to be a region in the brain where emotions are processed, remembered, and attached to associations and responses to them. It is closely associated with memories of fear and disturbing emotions like fear and terror. In the Greek language, amygdala means almond or almond shaped, which I think closely resembles the shape of the amygdala's head and the tonsil stone item. It's a pretty great summary of the amygdala boss, which I'm sure invoked many emotions of fear and horror within the players when first seen. Number of missing scholars in Yahar'gul, number of amygdalae in Yahar'gul. I actually have no idea what this is referring to. I don't know if there's some sort of correlation between the amount of amygdala you see in Yahar'gul and the amount of missing scholars as well. I'm not even sure who the scholars in question are. Are they referring to the dead people with the Mensis cage on their head? I don't know. If someone in the comments can clear that up for me, I'd be happy to make an addendum in the description. Logarius is a Fumarian. This is a theory that Logarius is of Fumarian origin. This I can buy, as Logarius utilizes blood magic like Queen Yarnham. The wheel and the executioner's gloves are also associated with Logarius. These are relics which belong to pre-Yarnham era Cainhurst residents who likely descended from Fumarians. He is also tall like a Fumarian. Moon presence behind everything. There is a common belief that the moon presence is behind the horrific events of Bloodborne. I can also believe this. The moon presence is a great one that has established a link to the hunter's dream. When you kill Gurman, you establish yourself as a threat to the moon presence. It comes down from the blood moon to kill you. While I'm not entirely sure what the motives of the moon presence are, but I'm in the belief that the moon presence is not up to anything good. Perhaps the moon presence is trying to prevent others from reaching the status of a great one, seeing as when you finally defeat them, you become a slug-like creature, akin to an infant great one. This is just my interpretation though. Cainhurst Portraits. This is in reference to the various portraits that can be found in Cainhurst Castle. A lot of these portraits can be found in the Bloodborne Art Book listed under concept art. Some of these are clearly female and male versions of the Cainhurst Night, whilst others can be seen as enemies, such as the Bound Widow, the Chime Maiden, a Shadow of Yarnham, and even those gargoyle things which are called Lost Children of Antiquity. Even Queen Annalise herself makes an appearance. There are 3 other portraits that have unknown origin. Some of them kind of look like statues you find around the castle, but the others, I don't know. 60 FPS port. I discussed this before in the Lance Mcdonald entry. There isn't much else to this one, other than a rumoured 60 FPS PC port coming out soon, but I haven't heard much else about it. The Choir Orphanage to create great ones. The Choir were a faction that were the highest ranking members of the Healing Church. They were mainly scholars who were in the pursuit of ascension. The Healing Church pursued ascension through blood ministration, which proved to be catastrophic, whilst the Choir tried to obtain ascension through experimentation and insight gained from Ebriatus, the left behind Great One. In the Grand Cathedral, the orphanage was a place of experimentation and study. It is called the orphanage because it was a place of learning for children so they could become intellectuals. The orphanage is located nearby the Flumen Flower Garden, which is connected to the research halls where patients were gruesomely experimented upon, trying to give them eyes on the inside. In summary, the orphanage served as the birthplace of the Choir, whilst housing the victims of the church's painful and gory experimentation. I'm not sure about this one. There are graves in the witch's abode location. I don't know if they have a significant meaning. I'm led to believe that the Witch of Hemwick had multiple victims and she buried them here in the abode. I don't know what else to say. Messengers are unborn fetuses of the Mensis Ritual. Again, I'm not really sure about this one. I don't know if it's referring to the unbirthed babies that died in pregnant women during the cataclysmic event of the Mensis Ritual that were rebirthed as messengers. It's a stretch, but that's all I can think of. Archibald is Parl. This is in reference to the item description of the Spark Hunter badge that is dropped by Dark Beast Parl upon death. The description reads, "Badge crafted in secret by Archibald, the infamous eccentric of the Healing Church, for his friends." Archibald was fascinated by the blue sparks that emanate from the hides of dark beasts, and dedicated his life to its artificial reproduction, in a style of inquiry that incidentally closely followed the methodology of Bergenworth. I guess there is a link between the dark beast and Archibald with his love of sparks. It's entirely possible, seeing as there are a lot of important figures like Ludwig and Lawrence who changed into horrific beasts themselves. It's not too far out to say that Archibald turned into a beast himself. I don't know why he'd be named differently though. That's one interpretation, I guess. Miyazaki. I'm guessing he said this in an interview at some point, but I think this is just a reference to most of his games in general. A lot of the lore in Dark Souls and Bloodborne is left up to the player's interpretation. Miyazaki makes the plots in his games convoluted and contrived, so there's a lot of details left out and unfulfilled, leading the player to come to their own conclusion. Warp chairs. I find this one really funny. The warp chair was basically the equivalent of the lantern in the Bloodborne Alpha. Basically, you sit in the chair until you fall asleep and wake up in the hunter's dream. It's just hilarious, and I wouldn't be mad if they had kept this in. Third Guidance Rune. The existence of the third level Guidance Rune is under question. There are level 3 runes which can be found in both the base game and in the Chalice dungeons, but the third Guidance Rune is yet to be found. Some say that the rune can be found in Layer 5 Chalice dungeons, but I've yet to see any proof of this. As a small sort of update, I've done a bit more research, and I've found that you can actually obtain the Guidance Rune, but only through means of a save file editing. So while you can obtain it in a way, it's still not legitimately be able to be found. So yeah, that's something. Parl escaped from Yahar'gul. This is purely from speculation, but due to the location of the Dark Beast Parl boss fight, there's a good possibility that Parl escaped from Yahar'gul. There's a pretty big hole in the wall in the Hypogean jail, so it makes sense that a beast as big as him would have been the one to make that hole. Lawrence is depicted in Cainhurst. I researched this one for a while and I can't say I've come up with anything conclusive. There are some theories that Lawrence started Cainhurst, but I take them with a grain of salt. Perhaps one of the portraits mentioned before might depict Lawrence, but for what reason? I think this one might be a dud. Old Yarnham Chapel statues. This one is a bit vague. There are statues all over the place in this game, so I can't really pinpoint where in Old Yarnham these statues are. Let me know in the comments if I missed something important. Church giants are controlled by choir bells. The church giants are a menacing enemy that appear in the cathedral ward. Strangely, these giants go to sleep once you defeat Vicar Amelia, and the day becomes night. I do believe that also around this time, the bells in the choir stop ringing. This has brought forth the belief that the bells act as an activation key for these giants. This would be cool, but I personally think that people are just overthinking and it's just a case of the giants getting ready for bed. How to pick up fair maidens. This one is pretty simple. This refers to a book that can be found in the Hunter's Dream with the title How to Pick Up Fair Maidens. I guess Gurman was struggling with the fairer sex. Yosefka was originally Murgo's wet nurse. I think this goes back to the outside of Murgo's arena where if you open a chest you'll get Yosefka's blood vial again. Many people interpret this as a connection between Murgo and Yosefka, possibly of Yosefka being Murgo's original wet nurse. I personally think the real Yosefka, not the fake one, would have nothing to do with Murgo, but possibly the imposter Yosefka might. This might also be a subtle way the game tells you to go back to Yosefka if you're missing an umbilical cord. Clock Tower Hunter Badge. This refers to some cut content. The Clock Tower Hunter Badge was an item you were supposed to get in the Old Hunters DLC, but due to some unknown reason they decided to cut it. My guess is that it would function like the other badges, unlocking certain items and weapons for purchase. You'd probably be able to buy the Rakuyo and the Church Pick. There's no description with this Hunter Badge. Pale blood is the colour of a blood-drained corpse, the sky of the blood moon. This is just another interpretation for what pale blood might be. There is a note in the game that says something along the lines of "Behold, the pale blood sky once the blood moon is active." I still think it's a lot more complicated than that. Wandering bosses. This is a phenomena discovered in Chalice dungeons. The good folks at Tomb Prospectors discovered that in certain dungeons, instead of normal enemies roaming the level, a boss would appear instead. These are somewhat common in lower level dungeons as well, with the Undead Giant and Keeper of the Old Lords making appearances, but much rarer ones such as the Fumarian Elder have also been discovered. Mad Ones in Yarnham. Mad Ones are an enemy that appear in certain areas, mainly Hemwick Charnel Lane and in some Chalice dungeons. I've never heard of any occurrences with them appearing in Yarnham. Further research yields no results, so I don't know what this one is about. The cry of the orphan is the same sound as Gurman's crying. I've listened to both of these cries and they do sound remarkably similar, but I feel there is no connection. I mean, do you really see the Orphan of Kos being related to Gurman? I don't think so. It's just From Software probably reusing some voice lines or something. Hear it for yourself. The choir wants to stop the Mensis Ritual. Like in real life, there can be subdivisions within religion. Mensis and the choir are two differing divisions that want the same thing but use differing methods to achieve the same goal. The choir tried to ascend humanity with experimentation, whereas the school of Mensis would try a ritual to commune with Murgo. Perhaps the choir saw the folly and foolishness in Mensis Ritual. This can be seen in a note found in Yharnam which reads, "The Mensis Ritual must be stopped, lest we all become beasts." Cut Cainhurst level. I don't think this has been discussed at an official level, but people theorise that there was more to Cainhurst, whether it's cut content like a bigger level or more enemies, or even more story elements like being able to marry Annalise. Cainhurst did feel quite short to me, so it wouldn't be surprising if there was supposed to be more to it. The only thing I could really find was some unused dialogue for our favourite Vileblood Queen, where she sounds completely different. Also, another Cainhurst nameless knight, which we'll get to later.
Is someone there? Well, whoever you are, it matters not. I will not die. Tarnished as I am, you came here for naught. Be off with you. Cease this. I am queen of the vile bloods. The healing church binds our tongues. Now off with you. You are a peculiar one. You've nothing to gain by speaking with me. Well, if you truly do not fear the healing church, tell me of your thoughts, your desires.
There's a lot more dialogue, but for the sake of not making this video like 20 more minutes longer and having it filled with just Queen Annalise's dialogue, we'll move on. The music box plays Murgo's Lullaby. I mentioned this one before, but I'll take the opportunity to further solidify a connection between Murgo and Viola, Gascoigne's wife. For some inexplicable reason, Viola's corpse in Odin tomb will disappear once you kill Murgo's wet nurse. This is never explained. Hunter's Nightmare Buddhist Hell. This one is just too big to cover in a video like this, but I'll leave a link with a huge article that explains all the similarities between the Hunter's Nightmare and Buddhist Hell. All 2300 dungeons explored. This is referring to the Tomb Prospectus community again, discovering all 2300 Root Chalice dungeons. A massive accomplishment to be sure. Flaming Giant. The Flaming Giant can be seen as one of two things. The one, which I thought of, was the peculiar enemy in the lecture hall second floor which looks like a church giant but with flaming fists as weapons. But I think this is talking about the rare undead giant variant discovered about 3 years ago in Chalice dungeons. It has a flaming blade instead of the usual cannon hand or club fist. I always hated fighting the undead giant, so this just gives me the fucking willies. Cainhurst Night. The nameless Cainhurst Night is some more cut content from Bloodborne. He's actually one half of a supposed boss, with the other half being Cainhurst Beast Horse. Statues of the knight can still be found in Cainhurst Castle, featuring his glorious peg leg. Demon Souls 3. This is a really weird one. Considering there isn't even a Demon Souls 2, I have no idea what this is on about. The only connection I can make is that in the Bloodborne Alpha or Beta, when players could fight Gascoigne, he would say something about Umbasa, which means something in the Demon Souls universe. So I guess people figured that Bloodborne was an unofficial Demon Souls sequel? Who knows?
Sick creature. May you rest in peace, Umbasa.
Post-ROM plot holes. I don't really know what this is on about, since I couldn't really discover any plot hole claims that match this. I did however find a humorous post from a GameFAQs user named Fort612 that gave me a chuckle. It reads, "So I was going back to and farming some echoes around central Yarnham and up into the cathedral ward, trying to piece together bits of plot from dialogue. I looked at the skull in Amelia's room, observed my surrounding, took careful stock of everything, and right as I was fighting one of those big skeleton dudes with the axes in the cathedral ward hit me. If there are infected humans and they've all gotten sick from that and the blood and such, then these giant skeletons, where do they get such big hats? There's no reason for them to exist. It makes no sense in the context of the universe. Checkmate, Miyazaki." Odin metaphor for Minamata Disease. Minamata Disease is a neurological disease caused by severe mercury poisoning. Signs and symptoms include ataxia, numbness in the hands and feet, general muscle weakness, loss of peripheral vision, and damage to hearing and speech. Now what the hell does this have to do with Odin? Well, one can draw many parallels between Minamata Disease and the Beast Plague. Minamata Disease is just another name for mercury poisoning, which people got after eating highly toxified shellfish and fish in the Minamata Bay. Quicksilver was used quite a bit in Yharnam, with the game hinting Quicksilver as a similar substance to mercury. I don't know, I actually do believe that it was called Quicksilver back in the day. You can see many similarities between this incident and the Beast Plague, which are both caused by an industrial accident. As usual, I've done a shit job explaining it, so you'll have to further consult Redgrave's Bloodborne analysis for a better explanation. Castle Archive Npc. I was really intrigued about this one, but unfortunately I couldn't find anything about this. I don't think there is even a location in Bloodborne called the Castle Archive. It sounds like he or she would have been located in Cainhurst. Creatures that have fully evolved cannot give birth. I'm not sure where this quote is from, but I think this implies that great ones cannot give birth, since they're apparently the peak of evolution. It probably has something to do with Formless Odin ripping the child out of Queen Yarnham, so she can finally have a child of her own. Formless Odin had tried before to have a child, but just like all the times before, had miscarried. The Lake of Mud. The Lake of Mud is an unused arena in Bloodborne. It's not currently known who the boss of the arena would have been, but due to the size, it would have been a huge creature of some kind. It looks similar to the shoreline where you fight the Orphan of Kos, but located a lot closer to Yarnham. Lawrence was originally your friend. Plot about finding him. I'll admit, I'm not super versed in the lore of Lawrence, or Lawrence, if you will. Okay. I did some research and found no theories that match this one. Father Norbert. Father Norbert is a cut NPC from Bloodborne that really looks like he doesn't belong in this game. He is mentioned in an unused dialogue of Mikolash. Some people assume that this character eventually turned into the Cleric beast, but this is just speculation. Not much else is known about Father Norbert, other than that his favourite part of the turkey was the turkey ass.
Here you go, Norbert. Say the best piece for you.
What's that?
Turkey ass. Eat up, sucker.
The doll is based on a Cainhurst noble. For the final entry on this iceberg, this one is kinda baloney. I think most people know that the doll was based on Lady Maria. Same voice, same face, same porcelain skin. The clothes do kind of look similar, but the only Cainhurst clothes we see are the armor sets. What the Bound Widow wears, the noble dress we get from there, and whatever Annalise is wearing. I will admit that the Cainhurst Night set have a similar colour scheme to what the doll is wearing, but other than that, I don't think there's any relation. And so ends the Bloodborne Iceberg. Thank you guys for watching. Hopefully the video wasn't too long and it was interesting for you. I definitely learned some new things from going over this iceberg, and I'm hoping more things will come up, because there are a lot of inconclusive entries on this iceberg that I noticed, and hopefully more things come up in the future that might shed some light on some of these entries. But yeah, if you like this, then please like and subscribe, and maybe I'll even do my own Bloodborne playthrough where I talk about certain lore theories and whatnot. So yeah, hope you enjoyed it. See ya!